So you're thinking about taking the plunge. You want to buy an RV. Congratulations, because you are joining millions of other Americans right now in the age of COVID. So you come to the right place though. In the next few videos, I'm going to kind of walk you through the journey you're about to face. And we're going to look at it from a lot of the aspect of a part-time RV'er, because that's what I am. But like I said, I'll walk you through the buying process. I'll help you kind of look at some of the things you need to think about as far as setting up a budget. You know, big RV, small RV, new, used. I'll barely touch on some of that. But again, we'll spread it out over a couple videos. In this one, we'll just kind of look at the budget aspect and where you want to go from there. So let's get into it. So the first point, and probably the most obvious, is going to be your budget, right? I mean, how much money are you looking to spend? And then the second question, which kind of goes into that, is what kind of RV are you planning on being? I mean, there's lots of YouTube channels out there of full-time RV people, but maybe that's not for you, you know? I mean, a lot of people's jobs don't allow them to travel full-time in an RV. So maybe you're just looking at a part-time. I mean, you got to keep that in mind with whatever you buy. So you have to establish a budget based off of what your goals are. And again, there's going to be a lot of factors that go into your budget, right? Other than full-time, part-time. I mean, do you own a truck? If you do not own a truck, I mean, you're going to have some major expenses going into this, because you're going to have to buy a truck, or you're going to have to buy something that's underpowered, which is going to be a lot more expensive. So you got to keep that in mind as well. So for the sake of the series of videos that I'm going to be putting out, we're going to look at this from the perspective of a part-time RV'er. So I do own an RV. I'm currently kind of sitting in it. I'll do a future video on it later, but we'll look at it from the part-time perspective. So for me, I did not own a truck. In order to buy a truck, I mean, the price of trucks right now is ridiculous in 2021. There's a chip shortage. All the manufacturers they're really hurting. The inventory's low, prices are high. So just looking at like a used diesel truck, for example, with 200,000 miles on it, you're still going to spend about 40 grand for a truck. That's crazy. So for me, I chose not to buy a truck. I chose to get something that was under power. That was the decision that I made. If you do happen to have a truck, I mean, that makes your options a lot more. I mean, depending on the towing capacity of that truck. But you can get travel trailers, you can get fifth wheels. Or, like I said, you still have the option for something that's under power. So once you sort out the feasibility, I guess, of what the options you have available, you can kind of move forward to the next step. You know, okay. Alright, so now that you have a general idea, right, we're setting the budget, you need to also understand, you know, I mean, what do you want to do with this thing? I'll give you an example. Like, I bought an RV, a Class A, around 30 feet, you know, but I don't plan on living in this thing, so I didn't want something big. As a part-time RV'er, you know, I want to be able to get in and get out of every campsite that I go to, because time is valuable to me. I don't have all day, so a Class A made sense, and a shorter Class A made sense. I can get in and out of a campground very quickly. To give you an example, like, I have a Class A CDL as well. I drove a semi-truck for many years before I got into my current job in manufacturing and got my degrees. Bigger does not mean better in the RV world. So, an example, like, I'm going to the Grand Canyon later this year, and I'm going to document some of that trip. And to stay inside of Grand Canyon National Park, you have to have an RV 30 feet or smaller. So if you're buying a big rig, 42 foot fifth wheel, you're not getting that in Grand Canyon National Park. Can you stay outside of the park? Yeah, but you're not going to be in the park. Like, I'm staying in Desert View, so I'll be able to walk from my campsite to the rim of the canyon, right from my campsite, because I bought an RV that was around 30 feet. You got to keep that in mind. Another story I'll give you, like, this, to go around bigger is not always better, especially in a part-time world. The first camping trip I ever took, I went to a national park. It was in Tennessee. I pulled in about the same time as a guy in a 42 foot fifth wheel. He had a beautiful GMC truck, dually, 42 foot fifth wheel. We got there at the same time. I got backed into my spot, got all my gear set up, got the power, septic, everything hooked up, ready to go. Cracked open a beer, was sitting in my lawn chair, and this dude was still trying to back into his spot. He was having a heck of a time. So like I said, you got to keep that in mind. A lot of these campsites around are not set up for big RVs. So I'm not saying that to scare you, but that's the honest to God truth. If you're a full-timer, you got time to burn, go for it. Get yourself a big rig, you know. you got all day to park that thing. You're probably going to be there for a couple weeks before you pull out again. But for somebody like me, who's only going to be there in 2 days, like I said, my time is valuable. I went with something 30 feet. I'm backed in and ready to go in 10 minutes. All right, so moving on. The next thing you really got to keep in mind, is if you do buy a Class A or whatever, are you going to need a vehicle? Because, obviously when you're driving a Class A, once you set up camp, you really don't want to break camp to go get food or something, right? In my experience, I have not really run into any issues not bringing a vehicle with me. Like I said, I'm in and out of most campsites 2-3 days. But I am coming up on some bigger trips, right? I'm going to Myrtle Beach next month for 6 days, I believe, and then I've got a 2-week Grand Canyon trip coming up. So I could probably get away with not having a vehicle for the Myrtle Beach trip, but I'm definitely probably going to need a vehicle for 2 weeks at the Grand Canyon, right? That's a long time to not have a vehicle. But you're going to have to think about that if you get a Class A. You're going to have to figure out, do I get a tow dolly or do I get a vehicle that I can tow? Those are extra costs that you got to think about when you're buying an RV. So just a flat tow vehicle, for example, like don't buy a dolly, just flat tow it. There's only certain vehicles out on the market that can actually be flat towed, because if they're not designed for being flat towed, you'll destroy that vehicle. And to set up the vehicle to even be flat towed, you're looking at costs anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 just to set the vehicle up to be towed. So keep that in mind. $2,000 on the lower end being you do a lot of the work yourself. You do the electrical wiring yourself, install a lot of the kit yourself, because the kit itself is like $1,500 depending on which one you get. I'm not going to get into that in this episode. Vehicle dollies are a little bit cheaper, but again, you got the hassle of having an extra thing you got to put at your campsite that you're hauling around now. A decent tow dolly will run you about $2,000, anywhere from 2 to 3, depending on the frame construction you get. They're not cheap. Where if you have a truck, and you like a travel trailer, you got a vehicle everywhere you go. You have the same accessibility if you have a smaller travel trailer and you have a vehicle. So that's just something to keep in mind. And really the last thing to think about to end this video, at least this portion of the video, is new or used. That's really the last question you need to ask yourself, especially when you're setting a budget, because obviously a used RV is going to cost you a lot less than a new one. That's on you. I can't tell you what to do. What I can do is give you a little bit of advice. If you go into your buying process knowing that buying an RV is not a money maker, they're a memory maker, you'll be all right. These things are not designed, they're not built to make you money. The minute you buy, even a used one, you're going to be upside down. So just keep that in mind. The minute you buy it, you're going to be upside down forever. Pretty much, unless you make huge payments or put a gigantic down payment down. But that's all the advice I can give you. Now, I bought a brand new one. Not that there's anything wrong with used ones, but I'm kind of a germaphobe. So I wanted a new RV. I wanted it to be my problems that are made, my bacteria, my everything. I don't like the thought of other people's dogs going through this, other people's kids, other people doing things in rooms in here I don't even want to think about, right? Everything that happens in this RV, I did it to myself. Some people can make the argument buying a used one, people already, had the problems that you have when you buy new RVs. That can be true. A lot of people, the new RV problems are fixed. But you also got to keep in mind there's people that trade their RVs in because they destroyed them too. So it works both ways. You might be buying somebody else's problems too. Problems that they created, problems they couldn't afford to fix. They just wanted to get rid of it at that point because it was so messed up. So you got to be careful when you're buying used. Get it inspected. I can't stress that enough. Don't get goaded into the shiny new thing. Get this damn thing looked over. Make sure all the problems are taken care of before you buy it, because if you do not, it's going to be your problem. So that's really all the advice I can give you guys for this episode. In the next one, I'll probably put it up in the next day or two. I'm not going to post too often, but when I do, I'll try to make it to the point in short, quick videos. I'll walk you through the actual buying process. What to expect when you're buying an RV, things to look for, things like that. I'll give you some pointers from my buying process. We'll look at warranties. Are they worth it? The tire packages they're going to try to sell you. we'll go over all that good stuff. So I want to thank you all for your time. Again, my name is Matt, American X. I know a lot of you know me for my political videos, but I'm going to take a little detour now. I'm going to try to go a little bit more outdoor RV living, because this is who I am now, trying to relax my life. So thank you for sticking with me, guys. I love you. For the new people, welcome. You know, any questions, go ahead and throw them in the comments. See you in the next video.